What if I told you that the most expensive fish finder on your boat is actually causing you to miss most of the fish? It sounds crazy, I know. We're all trained to look for the same thing. Big, beautiful drop-offs, sharp ledges, the kind of stuff that screams fish here on the screen. But today, we're talking about the exact opposite. We're talking about the subtle, almost invisible 1-foot rises that most guys drive right over at full speed. And I'm going to show you why these boring spots hold more fish, and often bigger fish, than any classic drop-off you've ever fished. This single idea might be the reason you've been coming home empty-handed from a lake you know is full of fish. So think about it for a second. How many times have you marked a perfect-looking ledge, fished it for an hour, and caught absolutely nothing? Let me know in the comments below. For decades, fishing magazines, television shows, and dock talk have hammered one single idea into our heads. Structure is king. And when they say structure, they mean big, obvious, dramatic changes in depth. They mean underwater points, sunken humps, and especially steep drop-offs. And on the surface, it makes perfect sense, right? A drop-off is a clear ambush point. It's a travel corridor for fish. It's a place where deep water meets shallow water. So we go out and buy better and better electronics, not to find new types of spots, but to find the same old types of spots with more clarity and detail. We get locked into this pattern. We launch the boat, we fire up the graph, and we start hunting for those sharp, vertical lines on the map. Find the drop-off, fish the drop-off. If it doesn't work, we just look for another, even deeper drop-off. The problem is, every single angler with a decent fish finder is doing the exact same thing. These classic community spots get hammered with pressure from the moment the ice melts until it freezes again. The fish that live there are either gone or they're so educated they wouldn't bite a shoelace with a stake tied to it. So let's start by breaking down the psychology of it. Why are we so obsessed with drop-offs? It's because they are easy to understand and visually satisfying on a sonar screen. When you see that bottom line suddenly fall from 10 feet to 30 feet, your brain lights up. It's a confirmation. It looks fishy. It's the underwater equivalent of a giant neon sign that says, "Fish eat here." Your expensive electronics with their fancy side imaging and down imaging technology are designed to show you this kind of detail in stunning clarity. They make those drop-offs look like underwater Grand Canyons, and because we spent all that money, we feel obligated to find the things the machine is best at showing us. We get a hit of dopamine every time we mark a sharp ledge, even before we make a cast. It feels like we've already succeeded. We found the spot. The hard part is over, but that feeling is a trap. It keeps us locked into searching for the obvious, while the truly productive spots go completely unnoticed, simply because they don't create that same dramatic picture on the screen. Now let's define what we're talking about when we say a 1-foot rise. This is crucial. It's not just a random bump on an otherwise flat bottom. A truly effective 1-foot rise is a subtle but distinct change in the lake bed that alters the entire dynamic of that area. Imagine a massive, barren parking lot. Now imagine a single parking curb running down the middle of it. It's only a few inches high, but everything relates to it. It dictates where water flows, where debris collects, and where people walk. That's our 1-foot rise. Might be a slight lift, where the bottom composition changes from soft mud to harder gravel or rock. It could be an old, silted-over roadbed, or it could be a subtle swell in an otherwise featureless sandflat. These are the places that your sonar, on its default settings, will likely smooth over and display as flat ground. You could idle over it a dozen times and not even notice it if you're looking for those big, dramatic drops. It's the definition of hiding in plain sight. It's a feature so subtle it becomes the perfect camouflage for an entire ecosystem. Think about it from the perspective of the smallest creatures in the lake. We're talking about baitfish, crawfish, and invertebrates. For them, a massive 30-foot cliff is irrelevant. It's just empty, dangerous space. But a 1-foot rise, that's everything. That subtle change in elevation is a current break. It gives them a place to rest, to get out of the main flow of water without expending energy. If that rise also represents a change from a soft bottom to a hard bottom, It's a 5-star restaurant. Algae and microorganisms, the base of the food chain, grow better on hard surfaces. So insects and tiny crustaceans will be there. And where they are, the minnows and shad will follow. It becomes a reliable 24-hour-a-day buffet. The bait fish aren't suspended in the middle of nowhere over the deep drop-off. They are relating to this tiny edge, this little piece of cover, and this consistent food source that 99% of predators, including fishermen, completely ignore. It is their entire world. Now that we know where the food is, let's talk about the predators. Why would a big bass or a wise old walleye choose a 1-foot rise over a classic drop-off? The answer is simple: efficiency and safety. A predator fish is an energy conservation machine. It wants to eat the most calories while burning the fewest. On a big steep drop-off, a fish has to move up and down that vertical water column chasing bait. It's a lot of work. But on a 1-foot rise, the game changes. The predator can sit comfortably on the down current side of the rise, basically invisible, and wait for the current to bring the food directly to its mouth. Or it can lie on the top of the rise like a sniper on a ridge and get a panoramic view of the entire flat, ambushing anything that comes into its feeding window. It's a low-effort, high-reward hunting ground. Furthermore, it's safe. There are no fishing boats hovering directly overhead, dropping jigs and noisy lures all day. It's a quiet, unpressured sanctuary where they can feed at will. They don't have to be on high alert. They can just be fish. So, the million-dollar question is, how do you actually find these things? You won't find them by quickly scanning a lake map on your unit. They're often too subtle to even be registered on most lake contour charts. The key is to change how you use your electronics and how you approach a piece of water. First, slow down. You can't find subtle details when you're running on plane. Pick a large, seemingly boring flat and start idling back and forth in a grid pattern. Second, you have to manually adjust your sonar settings. Turn off any auto bottom or smoothing features. You want to see the raw data. Next, and this is the most important part, you need to adjust your range. If you're in 12 feet of water, don't have your sonar range set to 50 feet. Set it to something like 20 feet. This will expand the bottom third of the screen, essentially zooming in on the lake bed. A 1-foot rise that was invisible before will now look like a significant bump on your screen. You are magnifying the details that matter. Let's walk through a real-world scenario. You're out on the lake. It's midday, the sun is high, and the bite is tough. Everyone is piled up on the main lake point, a classic community hole. You decide to try something different. You motor over to a huge featureless bay that everyone ignores. The map shows it's a consistent 12 feet deep. You start your grid pattern, idling at about 3 miles per hour. Your sonar range is set to 20 feet. For the first 5 minutes, it's a flat, boring line, nothing. But then you see it. The bottom line, which was sitting at 12 feet, ever so slightly bumps up to 11 feet for about 20 yards, and then drops back to 12. It's so small you almost miss it. You swing the boat around and pass over it again, this time marking a waypoint. You switch over to your side imaging screen. Now you can see that this subtle rise isn't just a bump, it's a long, narrow strip of something different. It's casting a tiny shadow, which means it has a hard edge. It looks like a darker, harder bottom composition. You've just found your spot. Side imaging is your secret weapon for confirming these spots. While your traditional 2D sonar is great for showing you the depth change directly under your boat, side imaging gives you the context. It shows you what the rise is made of and how it lays out. A 1-foot rise made of soft mud is not as good as a 1-foot rise made of gravel, rock, or sand. On your side imaging screen, harder bottom will return a brighter, more vivid signal. It will look yellow or white instead of dark blue or black. You can also see the shape of it. Is it just a small hump, or is it a long, winding ridge that you can follow for hundreds of yards? That little 1-foot rise might be the top of a buried fence row or an old railroad bed. You can often see individual rocks or small patches of grass on it that would be completely invisible on any other technology. This is the difference between blindly casting at a depth change and strategically targeting a specific piece of cover on that depth change. It's a whole different level of fishing. Once you've found and confirmed your spot, the next critical step is the approach. This is where most anglers mess things up. They find a great spot and then drive right over it with the big motor, spooking every fish in a 100-yard radius. You have to treat this 1-foot rise like it's a deer in a quiet forest. Shut down your main engine well upwind or up current from the spot. Use your trolling motor to make a wide, silent approach. Don't cast a shadow over the area you intend to fish. Remember, these are often shallow, unpressured fish. They are not used to boat traffic, and they will spook easily. Your goal is to position your boat far enough away that you can make a long cast past the rise and bring your lure back over it naturally. The first cast is the most important one. It's your best chance to catch the biggest, most aggressive fish on the spot before it even knows you're there. A stealthy approach is not optional, it's mandatory for this style of fishing. Now let's talk about lures and presentation. Because you're targeting a very specific, subtle spot, your lure choice needs to be precise. You need something that gives you excellent feel of the bottom. This is not the time for burning a spinnerbait through the mid-column. The number one choice for many is a football jig. It allows you to slowly and methodically crawl your way up to the rise, feel the change in bottom composition as you come over the top, and then slowly fall down the other side. A Carolina rig is another fantastic option. It lets you keep the bait in the strike zone while a heavy weight ticks along the bottom, transmitting every little piece of information back to your rod tip. You can literally feel your weight go from soft mud to ticking on gravel and back to mud. You are fishing with your ears and your hands, not just your eyes. You want your lure to surprise the fish to suddenly appear over that ledge right in front of its face. What if the fish are slightly more active? A bottom-bouncing crankbait can be absolutely deadly in this situation. Choose a crankbait that is rated to dive just a little bit deeper than the water you're in. For example, if you're fishing that 12-foot flat with the 11-foot rise, a crankbait that dives to 14 feet is perfect. This ensures that the bill of the bait is constantly digging into the bottom, kicking up silt and deflecting off any hard spots. You cast way past the rise and start a slow, steady retrieve. As the crankbait approaches the rise, it will start digging harder, and then as it comes over the top, it will deflect erratically. That change in direction and vibration is a massive trigger for a predatory fish waiting in ambush. It mimics a fleeing crawfish or a panicked baitfish perfectly. That moment of deflection is when you will get 90% of your bites. It's a reaction strike they simply can't resist, even if they aren't actively feeding. Let's bust a common myth right here. The myth is that these subtle spots are only good for small fish, that bigger, older fish need deep water and massive structure. This is completely false. In fact, some of the biggest fish in the system will seek out these subtle, overlooked spots specifically because there is no pressure. A giant 7-pound bass didn't get that big by being stupid. It learned over years of experience to avoid the community holes where boats are constantly running and lures are always splashing down. It found a quiet place where it can live and feed without being harassed. That place is often a 1-foot rise on a forgotten flat. It has everything the fish needs: a consistent food source, a slight current break, and most importantly, peace and quiet. So when you hook a fish on one of these spots, don't be surprised if it's the fish of a lifetime. You are not fishing for leftovers, you are targeting the untouchables. Understanding current is another huge piece of this puzzle. Even on a lake that seems to have no current, there is always some water movement, even if it's just wind-driven. This subtle current is what activates these 1-foot rises. The fish will almost always position themselves on the down current side of the rise, waiting for the moving water to deliver food to them. This is called the slack water area. So before you start fishing, take a moment to figure out which way the water is moving. Is the wind blowing from the west? Then the current is likely moving to the east. Position your boat so you can cast into the current and bring your lure back downstream over the rise, just like a natural piece of bait would drift. This natural presentation is far more effective than dragging a lure against the current, which can look unnatural and spook fish. It's a small detail, but it can be the difference between getting bit and not. This technique is not just for one species. While we've talked a lot about bass, this concept applies to almost any predatory fish. Walleye are famous for relating to subtle changes in bottom content on large flats. A 1-foot rise where sand transitions to gravel is a classic walleye hotspot. Big northern pike will use these same rises to ambush baitfish on shallow flats. Even crappie will relate to these areas, especially if there's a small piece of brush or a single rock on the rise that they can use as cover. The principle is universal in the underwater world. A subtle edge or irregularity creates an opportunity. It breaks up the monotony and concentrates life. So, no matter what you're fishing for, start thinking smaller, stop looking for the mountain and start paying attention to the curb. You'll be surprised at what you find holding on to it. Let's talk about the seasonal aspect. Are these spots good all year round? Absolutely. In the spring, as fish are moving up to spawn, these rises act as perfect staging areas and highways leading to the spawning flats. During the summer, when fish move out to deeper water, these subtle rises on main lake flats become their primary feeding grounds. They may be in 30 feet of water, but they will still be relating to that 1-foot change from rock to mud. In the fall, as baitfish group up and move shallow, they will use these rises as gathering points, and the predators will be right there with them. Even in winter, for those who ice fish, finding a 1-foot rise on a massive flat can be the key to locating the one spot that holds all the fish. The depth might change, but the principle remains the same. A subtle edge is always a high percentage spot, regardless of the season. Patience is a virtue, and it's especially true for this style of fishing. This isn't a run-and-gun technique where you make 5 casts and then race to the next spot. When you find a promising 1-foot rise, you need to commit to it. Pick it apart from every possible angle. Make casts that are parallel to the rise from both sides. Make casts that are perpendicular, bringing your lure up and over it. Change your lure colors. Slow down your retrieve. Speed it up. Sometimes the fish are positioned on the very top of the rise. Other times they might be 10 feet off to one side. Give the spot at least 30 minutes of focused effort before you even think about leaving. Often the first fish is the hardest to catch, but once you figure out the exact location and presentation they want, you can often catch multiple fish from one small area. You have to have faith in the spot, even when it looks like nothing. Now let's consider the opposite. When should you actually fish the big classic drop-offs? They aren't completely useless. There are specific times when they can be very productive. For example, on days with very unstable weather, like right before a major storm front, fish will often pull in tight to very sharp, vertical structure for a sense of security. Also, in fisheries with specific types of forage like alewife or cisco that habitually suspend in deep water, the predators will relate more to those deep drop-offs that give them quick access to that food source. The key is to not make the drop-off your only strategy. Think of it as just one tool in your toolbox. On most days, especially on lakes with high fishing pressure, the subtle rise will outperform the classic drop-off 9 times out of 10. The drop-off is your plan B, not your plan A. I want to share a quick story. I was fishing a tournament a few years ago on a lake I knew was tough. For the first 6 hours of the day, I fished all the community holes, the main lake points, the deep rock piles, the big drop-offs. I had one small fish to show for it. I saw at least 20 other boats fishing the same stuff. Out of desperation, I ran into a massive, shallow bay that everyone said was a dead sea. I started scanning and found a tiny, 1-foot rise that ran for about 50 yards. It was a change from sand to gravel. On my third cast with a Carolina rig, I caught a 4-pounder. In the next hour, I caught 4 more big fish off that one little spot and ended up winning the tournament. All the other competitors were still bunched up on the obvious spots, fighting for scraps. That day, it became crystal clear to me. The secret to catching fish isn't finding where they should be, it's finding where they actually are, and that's usually where nobody else is looking. So how do you develop the confidence to do this? It's tough to leave a spot that looks amazing on your screen and go hunt for something that's almost invisible. The best way is to dedicate a few trips specifically to this technique. Don't even allow yourself to fish a classic drop-off. Go out with the sole purpose of finding and fishing 3 of these subtle rises. It might be a slow day at first, you might even blank, but you are training your eyes and your brain to see the lake differently. You are building a new skill set. Once you do get that first bite on a spot that looks like nothing, a light bulb will go on. That one fish will give you the confidence to trust the process. After that, you'll start seeing these potential honey holes everywhere you look. The lake will suddenly seem 10 times bigger because you've unlocked the 90% of it that was previously invisible to you. You're no longer playing the same game as everyone else. This approach also makes you a better angler overall. It forces you to rely on more than just your electronics. It forces you to be more in tune with your lure, to feel the bottom, to pay attention to the wind and current. You become a detective, piecing together small clues to solve a puzzle. Any angler can drive to a waypoint on a map and drop a lure on a big drop-off. That's just following instructions. A truly great angler is one who can find fish where there are no instructions, where there is no obvious signpost. By focusing on these subtle, overlooked spots, you are elevating your own skills. You are learning the why behind a fish's location, not just the where. This knowledge is far more valuable than any waypoint, and it's something you can take with you to any body of water and use to find fish that other anglers can't. To wrap up the main part, let's put it all together. The relentless pursuit of dramatic drop-offs is a trap set by our own psychology and amplified by modern electronics. The real action, especially on pressured lakes, is happening on subtle, 1-foot rises that concentrate the entire food chain. These spots offer predators an efficient, low-effort and safe place to feed. To find them, you must slow down, fine-tune your sonar to magnify the bottom, and use side imaging to identify hard bottom areas. Approach these spots with stealth, position your boat carefully, and use bottom contact baits like jigs, Carolina rigs, and deep diving crankbaits to methodically pick them apart. Have the patience to learn a spot, and have the confidence to fish where nobody else is. This isn't just a random tip, it is a fundamental shift in how you should view and break down a body of water. It's the key to unlocking consistent success. So the big takeaway is this: stop chasing ghosts on those classic, overfished drop-offs. The real treasure, the untapped potential on your lake, is hiding in plain sight. It's in those subtle, 1-foot rises that you've been marking as an uninteresting flat for years. The turning point for you as an angler will be that moment when you intentionally ignore a 50-foot drop and instead spend 30 minutes picking apart a tiny 1-foot ledge, and you pull a personal best out of it. That's when the light bulb truly goes on. This changes everything, because it's not about finding more structure, it's about understanding subtle structure. It opens up 90% of the lake that other anglers completely ignore. You're no longer competing with a dozen other boats, you're pioneering on your own private water. Thank you so much for watching and for being willing to think outside the box. If this video gave you a new perspective, do me a huge favor and hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss the next one. We're all about breaking the old school rules to catch more fish. And for the comments, I really want to know, what's the most boring looking spot you've ever caught a giant fish on? Let's share some stories and prove this concept works.